But Russia in particular, of course, is pretty good at this stuff, disinformation, what they call maskorovka, and deception operations. And both sides, of course, are trying to win this media psychological propaganda battle. And we do need to be very careful what we believe. I have to be honest, from either side. I think it's quite a confusing situation, actually. The last few weeks, couple of weeks in particular, there have been some fairly mixed messages from senior Ukrainian officials, one declaring that they were ready for an offensive now, or then adding or tomorrow or the end of the week. And then, of course, most recently, one that was saying we need more equipment from the West. And I think these are probably probing attacks, looking at the Russian defenses, maybe thinking about where the lines of operation could be, where to establish their main thrusts for the counteroffensive. My sense is it is not the counteroffensive, but it may be the beginnings of the teasing, advances in preparation for that.
Yes.
But the lack of equipment is the big issue. We've chatted before about the fact that conducting defensive operations, which is what the Ukrainians have been doing so well for the last 14 months, is one thing. But to conduct serious counter-offensives, large scale over large areas, requires a lot of equipment, and it requires well-structured command and control, holding together armor and artillery and logistics and engineering and so on. And although the Ukrainians have been very open about having now equipped 9 brigades, often quoted figure, nonetheless, is that going to be sufficient to really make a big difference? The Russians have been building some strong defenses, and I'm not convinced that the Ukrainians yet are convinced that they are going to be as successful as they need or want to be.
Right. I mean, let's see, we may well be at an extremely critical time, but of course, worth bearing in mind, as you suggest there, Tim, that it's very much in the interest of both sides to mislead the other side, which basically means misleading the rest of us. We can't believe very much of what we hear or see.
No, we can't. I mean, any particularly modern military operations, one of the bigger, as a commander, I mean, one of my regular briefings was the media operations, the propaganda operations, the psychological operations, whatever you want to call it, and being clear about what was what was happening. But Russia in particular, of course, is pretty good at this stuff, disinformation, what they call maskorovka, and deception operations. And both sides, of course, are trying to win this media psychological propaganda battle. And we do need to be very careful what we believe. I have to be honest, from either side.
Yeah.
Ukrainians are very reluctant to give out some aspects of what's happening, particularly casualty rates. The Russians will always exaggerate. So these figures that we've heard in the last 24 hours of 250 killed, armored vehicles destroyed and so forth, we need to take it with a very large pinch of salt.
Yes.
And it's very difficult to get to the reality of it, what the facts really are.
And something, Tim, you'll have a particular insight on is the importance of training leading up to this moment. I was reading earlier today about the importance of the American and British training in particular of the Ukrainian troops who are going to be absolutely key to this coming or maybe continuing offensive. Americans and the UK have done a lot of specialist training. Britain's done a lot by way of basic training. But those are the troops who are going to be absolutely vital right up in the front line.
Yes, they are. And we have done a lot, as you say. But you're right in saying that a lot of it was, if you like, basic military fieldcraft training. And that's not unimportant. Clearly, that's very important. And it includes, out of interest, training of chaplains and so forth in terms of the overall picture. But key to this offensive operation is command and control at the operational level, the brigade and divisional level, the ability to pull together, the campaign plan, what we call in military parlance, the overall campaign plan. Something that, for example, General Rupert Smith did brilliantly in the Gulf War when I served with him, had the privilege of serving with him. It's the ability to move your brigades, to move your combat teams and your battle groups in cohesion, supporting one another, leapfrogging, and enabling to communicate with them. All the other things. It's orchestrating the battlefield, what Montgomery called teeing up the battlefield. And that requires commanders who've got a real grasp of the operational level of war, which is the level above the tactical level. And it's not easy. Actually, historically, the Russians have been very good at it. They were very good at it in World War II. I have to say, They've been pretty lousy at it over the last 15 months, thankfully. But nonetheless, for the Ukrainian point of view, so we've been doing a lot of training at the tactical level. One of the questions in my mind is how much training has gone on at that commander level, brigade commander
Mm.
level, at the operational level.
And lastly, and just briefly on the Ukrainian side, it'll be a gear shift because they've done an awful lot of defensive fighting, and this next phase is going to be about offensive fighting, which is different.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, I may have used these figures before, but in rough terms, if you're defending territory, you can defend with a 1-to-3 balance. In other words, for every one you've got, the enemy are having to bring about 3 times as much combat power to bear, if you like. Now, and the Ukrainians, as we've said, have done that extremely well. Now those numbers are reversed. The arithmetic changes. They need that sort of superiority when you're going up against well-prepared defensive positions, minefields, and all the things we've seen the Russians building over this last few weeks in preparation for countering this offensive. So yeah, it is a very different phase of war, and what we should be clear about is the Ukrainians should not start this counteroffensive until they're pretty confident that they are going to be able to achieve what they're doing, because the last thing they want is to find themselves failing and floundering and not being able to achieve their overall objectives.